In this video, you'll learn how to easily create your own fluidly responsive typography framework in Bricks Builder. It will automatically set perfectly sized and proportioned font sizes for you at every possible screen size. Your typography will require zero mental overhead, zero decision making about font sizes. You'll have a much wider range of type sizes to play with when you're building your sites, not just body copy and headings, and you will set it up just once and use it on every Bricks site that you build from now on. Because, you see, the way that Bricks wants you to set your typography by default makes life a lot more difficult for you. Problem one, it's very time consuming. Because when you set your typography up in theme style, you gotta manually set a font size value at every single level, at body copy and all the headings. And there is also setting a size at all 4 breakpoints as well for every single one of those. One at desktop, possibly one at tablet, possibly one at mobile landscape, etc. So if you're following along and doing the maths, that is 7 different typographical elements at maybe 4 different breakpoints each. So that is 7 times 4, which is 28 different font sizes. And that's a lot of data entry. 2, it adds a load of decision making and mental overhead. You have to decide what each of those 28 font sizes are going to be in the first place. Now that is a lot of decision making. And who knows if the sizes and the type scale that you choose are going to look good together anyway. 3, future maintenance. Because if I later decide I don't like this particular type scale, I don't like the sizes that I've set here and I want to change them, I have got to come back here into theme style and I've got to update probably every single one of them, maybe 28 different times. That is a maintenance nightmare and it's time I'm not going to get back. 4, your font sizes are still not going to look that great at the majority of screen sizes anyway. I'm in the Google Chrome Inspector here in the responsive viewer. We're at desktop size. I'll shrink the screen width down. Tablet mode kicks in at 991 pixels. Did you see that jump? Boom, jump. So at exactly 991 pixels, there's a sudden jump down to the font sizes that we set at tablet mode. Let's go a bit further down. Mobile landscape kicks in at 767 pixels and boom. Again, there, see it? There's that nasty jerky jump. Now, of course, no one but nerdy web designers like us are going to be sad enough to sit here dragging this little draggy handle backwards and forwards. But the problem is not really that there's a nasty jerky jump in size at the precise breakpoint, although it is very annoying. It is the fact that our chosen perfect font sizes only look as we intended at the exact breakpoint we set it at. So pretty much at all points in between, well, the font sizes that your visitor sees will not be the best. And that is the vast majority of screen sizes. Just to quickly show you here, here's a quick demo of how fluid typography works. This is in a tool called the Utopia Typescale Calculator that we're not actually using in this tutorial. But as I change the screen width, check out the font sizes changing over on the right. See, they're fluidly and smoothly scaling, not only in size, but also relatively proportional to each other as well. It's a beautiful thing, and that's what you'll have in Bricks soon. And finally, what are we up to? 5? Problem 5. By default, you have a very limited range of typography options. So I can set a font size for body copy, all 6 heading levels, which is fine. But what about a range of other text sizes as well? You know, like small text for disclaimers and small print, or large text for, say, a paragraph in a hero section, or maybe an even bigger than H1 heading size for hero header titles and things like that. Or what about the ability to make any of these heading levels look like any other heading level? I mean, wouldn't it be great to have the flexibility of having, say, an H3 heading, right? It's set as an H3, but you could make it visually look like one step up, like an H2. Believe me, that is massively useful in so many situations. Now, it's not Bricks' fault. I mean, they can't provide every possible typography size anyone might possibly need, but it would be nice to automatically have a whole range of other useful text sizes and heading sizes available as well, that all follow the exact same fluid, beautifully proportioned type scale as everything else. Anyway, you get the idea. The gist is the default way of setting global typography styles in Bricks has a load of problems. And that's okay, because there is a much better way. And so by the end of this video, you'll have easily created your own little lightweight, fluid typography framework that automatically generates a beautifully, relatively sized and proportioned type scale for you, with zero decision making and no tedious data entry required. Before we start, just to let you know, I've condensed all of the steps into a little PDF cheat sheet for you to refer back to at any time. To grab your own copy of the cheat sheet and also some very useful extra CSS code that I'll explain later what that's about, hop over to davefoy.link/bricks typography, pop in your email, and I'll send it all over to you. Let me just say, before I dive in, there are add-on framework plugins for Bricks that do all of this stuff for you automatically. I personally use ACSS or automatic CSS on all my own Bricks projects because, as the name suggests, it automates all of this and more. But there are also other frameworks like Oxyprops and Core Framework. Now, Core Framework does have a free version that allows you to generate a framework and copy out the code, as well as a paid version which integrates directly with Bricks. Now, I'm not using Core Framework here because the typography options was just a bit too convoluted to do what I need to do. I am keeping an eye on it though. I mean, even to an extent, Advanced Themer, which has a lightweight framework built in, alongside a ton of other brilliant stuff. I've dropped links to all of these tools below, and I will be making separate tutorials on them soon. But you might not want to install a separate add-on framework. It might be overkill for your needs. You don't need to install a separate framework to use Bricks. Many people don't. And even if you do eventually decide to use a framework plugin like I did, well, if you've never used a framework before, I highly recommend you first follow along with this video. You're only going to need to do it once, and it will be a great learning experience. So that, if you later decide, actually, I'm going to use a separate framework after all, you will thoroughly understand how it works. Okay, here's what we'll be doing. First, I'll quickly introduce you to the concept of a mathematical typographical scale, if you've never seen it before. We will then generate a text size type scale with an online tool I'll show you soon. We'll then generate a separate heading size type scale. We need two different type scales for reasons I'll explain. We're going to simply copy and paste the bit of code that our tool generates into our site. And then we'll use our new typography framework in Bricks. It is ridiculously quick and easy to use. Okay, so first let me introduce you to the concept of a mathematical typographical scale. Here is Jeremy Church's Typescale Calculator site. I will drop the link below, but spoiler, we're not actually going to use this calculator, but it is going to be helpful to quickly show you how proportional type scales work. So for example, imagine this 1 rem size here, or 16 pixels equivalent. Imagine this is typical body copy size. And then each jump up a step is mathematically proportional to the last one. And that is what makes this type scale look visually appealing. Now don't get bogged down in the specifics just yet, because as I say, we're not actually going to use this tool. This is just to show you the idea of a proportional size scale where each size jumps up or down in nice relative proportion to the previous one. So over on the left, let's have a look at how this scale is being calculated. Now, if you know a little bit about reading music, you'll recognize these as intervals in a musical scale. An interval is just the distance of the jump between one note in a musical scale to another. And you know how music sounds pleasing to us? Most of the time anyway. Guess it depends on who's making the music. The reason music sounds pleasing to us is because of maths, or math. If you're from the US and you insist on ignoring the S at the end, I'm kidding. So for example, this is a multiplier for a major third, 1.25. So following this particular scale, for each jump up a step, each font size is 1.25 times the previous step in the scale. But we can change this scale to something else. So let's try perfect fourth. This is now multiplying each step by 1.3333 recurring. And you get the idea, much bigger scale. Basically, depending on the scale that you choose, the relative jumps are either bigger or smaller, but always still mathematically proportional and gorgeous, like Brad Pitt's face. Anyway, I just wanted to introduce you to the concept of a mathematical proportional type scale so that you can get your head around this tool. This is the Fluid Typescale Calculator. It's at fluidtypescale.com. I'll drop the link to this in the description. We're basically just going to pop a few numbers in here. I'll tell you exactly what to put in. Don't worry, I'll walk you through every step. And I'll also drop links in the description to this calculator, but with all the correct values pre-filled in for you as well, just to save you a bit of time, because I'm good to you like that. First job in this calculator, we're going to create our text size scale. The heading size scale is separate, remember? Let's take this step by step. So we're going to set some parameters first for the minimum font size and viewport width that we're going to support. That's the smallest screen width. And then the same for the maximum font size and screen width that we'll support. I will tell you exactly what numbers to put in, though of course you can later experiment and change what I recommend if you don't like what I like. Totally cool. And then we'll set some other important stuff below, but we'll get to that. As we fill all of this in, the code that we're going to copy and paste into our site will be generated here right before our very eyes, like actual magic. I'm going to take quite a bit of time to explain what's going on and why I'm setting things up the way that I am, so it will take me longer to set up, but this really will take you about a minute, and you'll probably only ever have to do it once. So let's tackle the minimum font size and viewport first. So here is where you set these values for the smallest screen size you'll support. So base font size, for the text size scale that we're creating, that means body copy. And I want 16 pixels to be the absolute minimum body copy font size. I don't want body copy to be ever smaller than that because it'll just be too hard to read. And then the smallest screen width that we're going to support, well, I am going to go with 320 pixels, which is a pretty small mobile phone. And so this now means that body copy will never drop below 16 pixels, even if somebody visits our site with a screen even narrower than 320 pixels. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering, all of this is going to be converted to rem for us. Don't worry. It's just in pixels here because it's just easier to understand. Now to set the type scale at this precise viewport width. This drop down is a bit fiddly, honestly, at least in my browser anyway. If you click into it, it only shows you the current option, which is a bit weird. So what you have to do, I've found, is delete what's in there, then click into it again, and then you get all the options in the drop down. Also, I have my screen zoomed up for this tutorial so that you can see what's going on more clearly, but the drop down doesn't zoom up like the rest of the screen, so I'm actually having to zoom in even more here. Anyway, you'll recognize all these musical intervals from earlier, and I'll just say, here I go with major second for body copy, which is 1.125. So, at our smallest supported screen width, each font size jump in our type scale is going to be multiplied by 1.125. So, the relative jumps up in size are going to be quite small, which is perfect for small mobile screens. I'll show you what these actually look like in reality in a second. But let's come down to the maximum settings. Now, I like body copy to be 18 pixels at my absolute maximum screen width. Yep, it's only 2 pixels bigger than the smallest screens. So even with viewports wider than 1280 pixels, body copy is never going to get any bigger than 18 pixels. I personally don't like having big-ass body copy font sizes on desktop screens. I mean, some people here would go with 20 or 22 or even 24 pixels here. I mean, whatever floats your boat. You go nuts. And the maximum screen width, well, I'm going to leave this at 1280 pixels because that's usually the maximum site width. I set my sites in bricks anyway. Obviously, you set it to whatever max site width you like. Now, here is the important thing. Whatever you enter here in the calculator must be the same as whatever you set your container width back in bricks theme style, or the rem equivalent anyway. Mine's in pixels here, just for clarity for this video. I'd always set mine in rem, of course, and I recommend that you do too. But this is the maximum width your site content will be in bricks, and this value must match what you put in the max width part of the type scale calculator. And if it doesn't match, you might open a rift in the space-time continuum and we all die. You don't want that on your conscience, do you? So yeah, you probably better make sure that this max screen width here is the same as you set in bricks for all our sakes. And for the type scale, again, delete the value and then click back into the field to see the drop down. So for the type scale for text sizes on the maximum screen width, I go with mine a third, which is 1.2. I am aware that this is only one step up from the scale we set for the minimum screen. I personally like that for the text size scale, but you got to experiment and see what you like best. But with all of these type scales, whatever you choose, you will end up with nicely proportioned, fluid, scalable typography, just with different relative size jumps. Anyway, that's the values filled in. The ones that I use and think look good anyway. You can tweak them as much as you like. Now here we could just copy this code to our clipboard now and drop it into our site because this is basically our text size scale framework. But we've got a few things to fix yet. a few enhancements to make this framework easier to use. So the next thing is to set our preferred names for each step in the type scale. You see, these names in the code here will be the names of each step in our type scale, and we'll be using these names in our site when we use the framework. You'll see all of this in action later on. Don't worry about the details for now. And I am going to explain what this code is actually doing very soon as well. And these default names the calculator's made for us are fine, I guess, but I want to change them to something a bit more meaningful and easier to remember, because it'll make it much easier to use the framework on our actual website. So you can see here that each name in our text size scale starts with font size. That's set by this variable prefix here. Now I would prefer it to say text, because then we'll easily remember that these are for our text size scale as opposed to the heading scale, which is coming next. So see, all the names start with text now. And then in this field, I'm going to simplify these step names just to extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. That's XS, S, M, L, XL. I'm just using t-shirt size names here because everyone understands t-shirt sizes, right? And the baseline step is medium or M. What does that mean? Well, that just means that step M, or medium size text, is the same as whatever we set our base font size to up here. Remember that I said our base font size is body copy. So in this framework, medium is the same as body copy. I'll later be showing you how to use all of this in the site, don't worry, but for now, just remember medium is the same as body copy. Rounding. A maximum of 2 decimal places for the values in this code is fine. We don't need to get any more granular than that. I'll tell you what, before we look at the rest of the options here, let's just whiz down to see this in action. So there's a handy preview here where you can change the screen width and see a preview of what the type scale is going to look like at that screen width. Actually, I'm just going to quickly turn rem off for a second, just because it's easier to understand what's going on in the preview with pixels. See how all these text sizes are fluidly and smoothly changing size? And how, if we drop below our minimum screen width, 320 pixels, remember, then the scaling stops. You see, step M, or medium, that's the one that we set to be the baseline step, body copy. So here's the minimum font size, here's the maximum font size that we set, and here's the font size that it is right now, 16 pixels. It will not get any smaller than that. And then as we go back up, all these steps are scaling fluidly, not just in font size, but also between the 2 min and max type scales that we set as well, all at the same time. So the relative jump in size between each step gets bigger as well with bigger screen sizes. There are no nasty jumps at fixed breakpoints because there are no breakpoints. And then let's go bigger than 1280 pixels, our maximum screen width. It stops again. No more scaling. And so setting the maximum font size just stops them getting bigger and bigger and getting out of control. Gorgeous, isn't it? Now, before we attend to the rest of the options, this is as good a time as any for me to quickly explain what the code is doing. You don't absolutely need to understand it to use this framework, but it's pretty simple, really. So as you can see, each line corresponds with each step in our text size type scale. Each line starts off with what is technically called a CSS custom property, but everyone calls them CSS variables. So text XS is a variable, text S is a variable, text M is a variable. You get the idea. Variable names always start with 2 dashes. That's how browsers know that these are variables. And notice they can't have spaces in them. That's why it is text-M, text-L, etc. You can call variables whatever you like we just did here in the calculator. It's just best to call them something that you can easily remember. Now you can think of a variable as just a name. It's like shorthand for something else. So this lot after the colon in every line, this is the value of each variable, right? It's what that nice and easy variable name actually means. And this bit, the value of each variable, is the fancy code that is calculating our fluid type scale for us. So briefly, this is a CSS function called clamp. In fact, all of this is the clamp function. I'm going to take text M as an example. So this is basically saying at the smallest screen size, make text M 16 pixels. And then at the other end, this is our maximum font size, 18 pixels. And then this bit in the middle is what's called the preferred value. And all you really need to know is this is the clever bit that is figuring out how to scale smoothly and fluidly from this maximum font size right down to this font size. And that's it really. Clever, eh? Now I'm going to flick show output in rems back on because we definitely want our code in rem, not pixels. Way better for accessibility and scalability. Now, important question here, do we want to include fallback CSS? What this means is the CSS clamp function that makes this code work isn't supported in older web browsers. So if we check this box, it's going to give us some alternative code instead that will still run in modern versions of web browsers, but will also fall back to something that looks okay in older browsers as well, albeit not fluidly responsive. So the question is, what's browser support like for the clamp function? Well, if we quickly come over to caniuse.com, this is a site that tells you about browser support for different web technologies. And you can see clamp is supported by every modern web browser and even semi-modern web browsers. And so for me, I feel confident enough using the clamp function without the fallback code. There is no harm in using the fallback though, if you prefer. I just think it's even more code to load and maintain, and I'd just rather keep things moving forward. If you want to use the fallback, you go for it. Show output in rems, we already did. Definitely use rem, not pixels. And then finally, this calculator lets you set the value of one rem in pixels, and this must match what you've set for this in your own Bricks install. See, it says the default is 16 pixels, and normally, by default, if you don't change anything in your own website, web browsers just assume that one rem equals 16 pixels, and that's what this framework code also assumes by default. But sometimes web designers change their root font size in their website from 100%. They change it to 62.5% instead, which then makes one rem equal 10 pixels for visitors to their website. The idea is it's just easier then for the web designer when they're building the website to convert from pixel to rem. So here in Bricks theme style in typography, this is where you set your percentage HTML root font size. Mine's set at 100%. I never change it to 62.5% because at the end of the day, it is a bit of a hack. And if you're using a typography framework like we're building here, you might not need to be converting from pixel to rem too often anyway. But in a default Bricks install, root font size is set to 62.5%, which is a bit of a bizarre default setting, in my opinion. Well, why not have it at the default 100%? And then let people change it if they want to. But that is a rabbit hole I haven't got time to go down here. So if your root font size is set at 100%, which is what I always set mine as, then congratulations. There's nothing else to do. But if yours is 62.5% and no judgment, then in the calculator, set this value of one rem to 10 pixels instead. That's it. I'm setting mine at 16 because that's 100%, and I just prefer not to use the funny root font size hack. Anyway, that's everything we need to do here. It took me a lot longer because I was explaining it all to you, but this should take you less than a minute to set up. And again, I've dropped a link in the description to this calculator with all of these values filled in automatically anyway. So now we need to come up and copy this code to the clipboard. And now, where to put the code. Now, if you already have somewhere that you add CSS code in your site, then you can just go and put it in there now because this is going to eventually end up on your site. But just to keep this video simple for now, I'm actually just going to paste this into a note, right? I mean, you might use a text editor, whatever. We just need somewhere just to make a note of it. And I'm also just going to remind myself that this code here is for the text size scale, like this. Again, if you know where to put this CSS on your site already, just go and put it straight in there now. But anyway, for now, that is the code for our text size scale. Now to set our heading size scale. Because the scale that works for text sizes isn't going to work for headings. And for me and my tastes, okay, I could take you through a whole round of experimentation here to get to the point, but you can experiment to your heart's content in your own time. And I'm just going to tell you that after a lot of trial and error, for headings, I set the minimum base font size to 20 and the maximum heading font size to 22. You'll see why and how this translates to our heading size scale in a second. But then for the type scale for the smallest viewport, I bump up to 1.25, which is a major third. So it's a bigger multiplier than it was for text sizes. That means that the heading size jumps are going to be bigger. And for the type scale for the maximum viewport, I'm going to go with 1.333, or a perfect fourth, as it's known in music. Now we're going to need new type scale names for headings. We can't have the same as text sizes, small, medium, large, etc. And we might as well just name them according to HTML heading levels, yeah? H1, H2, etc. So here that will be H6, H5, H4, H3, H2, and H1. There's a comma between each one. And then for one bigger than H1, You know when you want the amp to go up to 11?
It's one louder.
Well, we could have one bigger size than H1. I could call that title. And in this heading size scale, I'm just going to tell you that the baseline step is H4. That means H4s will be the base font sizes that we set up here, and then the other sizes will jump up and down from that according to our mathematically proportioned type scale. We also need a variable prefix here, and we don't want text like before. Well, I could go with H again. We'll see in the code that is now H, H6, H, H5, and so on, which is a bit clunky. Well, I could lose the prefix completely, but now we have 3 dashes at the start. Yep, there's a required 2 dashes, and then the missing prefix that it's expecting, and then another dash. So that's not good either. So because of the need for a prefix here, well, what I'm going to have to go with, I think, is H as the prefix. And then I'll just have to lose the H in each of the type scale names. That's okay, it's going to work. Oh, drop the baseline step back to 4 again. Okay, if we look at the code now, well, it's now H-6, H-5, etc. Not quite as simple as I'd like, but it's close enough. And the rest of the stuff that we set here earlier can stay exactly the same. Okay, before we grab the code, just whiz down the page again. Here's the new type scale for headings. See? Bigger sizes and bigger jumps in size than we had for the text size scale, but still fluidly and smoothly changing size. And the relative proportional jump in font size alters accordingly too. Less of a jump on smaller screens, bigger jump on bigger screens. It's a beautiful thing. And it's just math. I mean maths. Once again, copy to my clipboard, back to my notes. And I'll also make it clear that this is the heading size scale, just as a reminder. Again, you could paste your CSS code straight into your site, but for this tutorial, at this stage, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole just yet of where you should put CSS. So next, it is time to add the CSS code into our site. So here, I'll highlight and copy all of this code. Now, where to put it? Well, you basically just add it wherever you'd add any CSS code to your site. So for example, that could be in the customizer. So that's in appearance and customize. And you could just paste it into additional CSS here. That's one way. It's not ideal because CSS isn't so easy to edit in this field. Or if you have a child theme, you know how to create a child theme, you could put the CSS in there in a CSS file. But it is much easier to use a code snippet manager plugin, which is what I do. You know, like code snippets or WP Codebox. I'm actually using WP Codebox here. I did change the default layout here in settings. You can change that down here. Just because this layout makes much more sense to my brain. We need to create a global CSS file. I haven't got one on this demo site yet, so I'm first gonna create a new snippet. Oh, I think I need to come out of settings. Give it a title. Global CSS will do, whatever makes most sense to you. Then the type of snippet, that is CSS. With that set, I'm just gonna collapse this panel down now to give us a bit more room. And I will paste in the CSS code. Once that's pasted in, we've got to save it straight away. And then here is a pro tip. Make sure that the snippet is enabled. Very important. You know, this doesn't work nearly as well if you don't actually enable the snippet. I'm not going to tell you how I know that. Anyway, we're almost there now with this code. We just have to fix a couple of things because this isn't correct CSS just yet. Remember, this is a once only job. You'll never have to do this again. So first, in CSS, we can't have these 2 reminder labels as random text just floating about like this. Look, I don't make the rules, okay? If we want to keep them as a reminder of what this code is doing, and I think we should, then we need to make them into CSS comments instead. Comments are just for leaving yourself little reminders like this for future. So to do that, to create a comment, you type a / and asterisk at the start. I'll add a space as well. And then at the end, you do that in reverse, an asterisk and then a /. I'll do that with the heading size scale as well, / asterisk, and then an asterisk / at the end. And the second thing we need to fix, which is very important, we need to put all of this code inside the root selector. I'll explain why in a second. But to do that, all we need to do at the start, create a new line. I'm going to type a colon, then root, then a space, and then an opening curly bracket. And then right at the end of this code, I'm going to add a closing curly bracket down here. That's it. See how all the code is now contained inside the root selector? Remember, if you want all of this code just given to you, then go to the link in the video description. I'll send you all the code you'll need and the PDF cheat sheet reference for this entire framework. Oh, in WP Codebox, I also like to come up here and hit Format Code. That just makes it all nicely indented at the same level and all neat and tidy. Makes absolutely zero difference to how this CSS works, but Everyone loves a tidy coder. Actually, one final very quick thing I'm going to do here is just rename these heading variables. Remember I mentioned it back in the calculator? I'm going to get rid of the dash in the middle of each variable name, so they're just h1, h2, etc. You don't have to do this. I just want to make these variables even easier to use, and the simpler the names, the better. I'm going to remember h1, h2 way easier than h-1, h-2. I'm going to leave the h title with a dash in it because I think that's a different thing. It's not the name of an HTML heading level. Ooh, one more quick pro tip. What you could do here as well is paste in the URL of the calculator for each scale. So when you set up the calculator for the text size scale, you could paste it here. Although you will have to put the URL inside CSS comments like this with the / and asterisks. And you could do the same when you set up the calculator for the heading size scale as well. Again, just above it, paste it here, and again, it'll have to be in CSS comments. You can't just drop URLs in CSS. Now, why should you do this? Well, it's just a reference for your future self. If you go back to this URL again at any time, the calculator will be back to all these settings. So later on, if you decide you want to change this scale to something else, you can easily jump back to the calculator, make your tweaks without having to start all over again. And remember, I dropped both these URLs in the description below this video if you want a quick and easy head start as well. Anyway, so with the code pasted in and formatted properly, and we've saved it again, just to make sure, this is now your basic typography framework code in place. I am actually going to give you some even more useful code to add to this, which is going to make your life even easier, but we'll cover that later. Okay, now the big reveal. We need to actually use this framework in our site. And this is the easy bit. We're going to use this framework in two ways actually. One will be to set global typography styles in theme styles, and two will be when we're actually setting font sizes when we're building pages. So first, let's come back to theme style. Actually, I'm just going to come top right and save this page, and then I'm going to refresh. That's just so this page knows about the new CSS code that we added. So let's come up into theme style again, settings, theme style, down into typography, and into body. Here is my current hard-coded font size. And remember our variable name for body copy was text M, text medium. So we need to replace this hard-coded font size with text medium variable. Now you maybe think that all we need to do here is just type the variable. Let's try it. Remember variable names start with 2 dashes and then the name text-M. And I can tell you now that doesn't work. That'd be too easy, wouldn't it? Thing is, you can't just type a variable name directly into the field. You have to format it properly with proper CSS syntax. Luckily, that is very easy. So, starting again, that is VAR for variable, then open and close parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, now type the variable, 2 dashes and text M. And that is it. Remember, I said that a variable was like a placeholder or shorthand. Well, this variable is just shorthand for the complicated clamp function that the calculator made for us and that we don't have to understand. It's so much easier to just use a variable in the font size setting. Plus, bonus, this now never needs to change. If we later decide, I know, let's create a whole other type scale, well, all you do in the code, you just update these values here, as long as you use the same variable names. So if you change the value of text M here, for example, you added a new value, the value of text M would now be the new value. And that would, of course, automatically update wherever you had used the text M variable, like here in theme style, for example, or anywhere else, in fact. Another important thing, you only have to set this variable once at desktop only. That's it. No other breakpoints required. In fact, if you do have any font sizes previously set at different breakpoints, I don't have one at tablet, do I have one mobile landscape yet? Make sure you remove those. Let's have a look at portrait. No, we're good. So you only want the variable set once at desktop size. That is it. If you have any other font sizes set at any other breakpoints, you absolutely must remove them because they will override your lovely responsive framework. So that's body copy. That was nice and easy. Let's do the same for headings as well. So heading H1 into typography and font size. Again, just make sure you're in desktop mode, remember. I'm going to remove this hard-coded font size value. We need our H1 variable. Variables, remember, start with VAR for variable, open and close parentheses, and then our variable name. 2 dashes and H1. And once again, just at the other breakpoints, just make sure you remove any other hard-coded values. Mobile landscape, remove. Mobile portrait, remove. You've got to make sure that you have one variable set at desktop only. Now to H2, once again, get rid of the hard-coded font size, and again, var, parentheses, 2 dashes, H2. Job done. I will also just quickly remove the previous font sizes that I'd set at the different breakpoints. I'll speed this up a bit here because you get the idea now. And I'll also just quickly set the same for H3 and H4 again while in desktop mode. And again, I am just going to make sure that I don't have any other font sizes set at any other breakpoints. I'm going to fast forward past all of this because I'm sure the first few times watching me do this were tremendously exciting, but it's getting a bit old now, isn't it? I'm not going to bother with H5 and H6 for this video because, as I've already said a couple of times now, I rarely use these anyway. All right, now let's see this in action. So I'm just going to quickly save this page. And now let's slide into preview mode. I'm also going to choose to view this on the front end. We're still in the responsive viewer, which is great. And now I'm going to change the viewport width again. And you can see here, the font sizes are now all responding smoothly and fluidly. And it is a really quite beautiful thing. Almost brings a tear to my eye. All nice and easy once you know how. And to think, all the hard work has been done by the calculator, the code that it gave us, and then just pop in a few variables in theme style. Now that is all the typography that we are able to set in theme style, but you know, there's more to our framework than just body copy and 6 headings. So let's now see how we can use the framework when we're actually building our pages as well. Remember, our framework includes a range of other text sizes that follow the same fluid type scale. So on the page here, I've just added a set of text elements, and what we'll do is make each one the corresponding type size. So I'll first select Text XL. I'm just going to be doing this the simplest way as a demo for now, but in style, let's come to typography. And in font size, I'm just going to pop in the variable Text XL, and boom, that is now the extra large text size. Let's do the next one. I'll select Text XL, font size, pop in the variable, and that is now the large text size. I'm going to do the same with the rest of them here. I'm going to speed this up a bit, but you can see it is really easy. And I'm going to do all the way down to extra small. Now, of course, you more than likely won't be just styling elements directly like this. You'll want to be styling a class instead. I know, I'll come back to that. Hold that thought. But also, just to show you, let's also make a bigger heading than H1 as well. So I'm going to quickly duplicate this H1, right click, select the first one. And then in the font size, I'm going to set a variable of H title. Remember that one? And that is great for our bigger headings, which might be good for hero headers and things like that. While we're on the subject of headings, one extremely useful byproduct of having variables for heading sizes is that we are able to make certain heading levels look like another heading level. Let me show you what I mean. So let's take this H2 here. I'll select it. You can see the HTML tag is set to H2. Let's imagine we need it to be an H2, but what if we wanted it to look like an H1? That is not uncommon. Really easy. I've selected the H2, into style, into typography and font size. I'll pop in the variable, 2 dashes, and in this case, I want our H2 size to be H1. See? How useful is that? I'm just going to get rid of that now. That's just for this demo. Now, as I say, like all styles in bricks, in reality, you'd want to be setting these font size variables on a class, right? Not on the ID, not directly styling the element like this. So the element that you're styling, let's just get rid of this. Let's take our Text XL text element as an example. Now, it might already have a class of, I don't know, hero intro, something like that. Well, with the class selected and it's active, now you could just add the font size variable to all the rest of the styles that you're setting on that hero intro class as well. So that is one way, and I would do that a lot of the time. But you know, sometimes you just want to quickly set a font size on an element, you want to style it with classes the right way, but you don't want or need to create a whole new class to do it, like the hero intro that we just had here. Well, in that case, you could instead create some matching utility classes for all the sizes in the framework. A utility class is just a class. It's like any other in bricks. It's just a class that does one thing only, like set a font size. So a utility class is just something you can just pop on an element, changes the font size, and away you go. Let me show you. Oh, first, actually, I'm just going to remove that class I added there. So yeah, you could here create special text size classes to match our text size variables. Now, one way of doing that is just to create the class from scratch here in bricks. So I could create a class here of, say, Text XL, and then with that class created and active, then set the font size for this class. And of course, that is our TextXL variable. And now with this class created and the font size set on it, now I could pop this class of TextXL on any element in Bricks, and that element will get our extra large font size. And you could then carry on and manually create a separate class for all the different type sizes in the scale, like a class of TextL, a class of text medium, a class of text small. And manually creating all those classes in Bricks would be fine, it will get the job done, but there is a much better way. Let me show you. Seeing as we want this framework to be as automated as possible, my preferred option is to instead have all the text size and heading size utility classes already created in our central CSS code instead. This is really flexible and definitely the best for easiest future maintenance. Now, I am conscious this video is getting really long, so if you hop over to davefoy.link/bricks typography, I'll fire you over all this utility class CSS code that you'll need, with an extra bonus video with instructions on how to use it, plus, again, the handy quick PDF cheat sheet with all the steps and a visual reference for you to refer back to at any time. I do also teach a spacing framework in my Build with Bricks course for all your spacing and column gaps and section padding in a similar vein. But yeah, now with this code in place, which we can use on every site that we build from now on, we have a nice, simple, fluid typography framework for body copy, all the heading levels, and a range of additional text and heading sizes as well. And the best bit is, in future, we can just update any of the values here for any of these variables in one place at any time. And that'll update the value of these variables across the entire site. And now it's your turn. Drop me a comment below and let me know what you think. You got any questions? How do you set global typography on your Bricks sites? Do you create your own framework? Do you use an add-on framework instead? If so, which one? I'd love to know. Anyway, thanks as always for your time. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you here again soon.